All right, everyone. Let's,
Hello.
are we okay, Jessica and Corey? Okay. Let's call the meeting to order. Thank everyone for being here. And a lot to cover today. So let me just start off by reading the purpose statement. The primary objective of the CAC is to ensure the capital maintenance and public transportation projects and programs approved by the voters at the November 2nd, 2004, November 6th, 2012, and November 7th, 2017 ballot measures are accomplished with Pprta funds. The committee reports directly to the Pprta Board of Directors. Welcome. So let me start off with just some announcements. I'd like to welcome Emily Magnuson, our new CAC member. Went through the interview process and won. And so she is deciding whether she wants to continue and declare victory or not after the meeting. Were you going to say something? Oh, you're counting. Oh, the other new member was Tony Joya. Is Tony on? No, Tony's, he was an at-large member as well. So welcome to those. And then I'd like to welcome Scott Trainer, the Fountain City Manager. He's going to be talking to us later about the whole Fountain situation we've talked about a couple of times before. So, so with all that, established all members can vote. And is Carlos still on the hook, or he?
Carlos and Tony are on the bubble until we hear from Larry Tobias, Bruce Colson, and Cindy Tompkins. But as long as two of those three are not on, then Carlos and Tony can vote.
Okay. Welcome to everyone online as well. All right. Approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
Yeah, this is Dave Zelenock. I would move approval.
Thank you, Dave. Rick Hoover, second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, good. Thank you. Public comment period for items not on the agenda. Any of the CAC members have any public comments? Okay, not seeing anyone raise hands or in the room. And in the public, Scott's going to talk to us later, so I'm sure he doesn't have anything right now, right? Okay, very good, thank you. All right, do I have a motion for approval of minutes of the 1 June meeting?
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
Thanks, Joan. Any second? And Craig, second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Minutes are approved. Thank you. All right, financial reports. Beverly.
Okay, good afternoon. I'll wait till we get down to the first page here. Okay, great. Thank you, Jessica. So April's tax revenue receipts were 12,925,000, which was almost 528 over the monthly budget, or 4.3%. And this is still the original budget. The board will be approving, hopefully, the amended budget next week. And on page 2, we were ahead of last year, April receipts by 795,000 or 6.6%. So we're 3,648,000 ahead of last year in the 4 months, or 8.3%. And are there any questions on any of the financial reports?
Any questions for Bev? We should get a new one next week or week and a half, right?
Yeah, next week for sure. By next Wednesday, I think.
Okay. All right, no questions for Bev. Thank you, Bev.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. I got myself confused, which isn't very hard to do. All right, item number 6. Capital maintenance and public transportation contracts, City of Colorado Springs. Gail?
Yes, Gail Sturgeon, City of Colorado Springs, City Engineer, Deputy Public Works Director. The city is bringing the shortest contract list since I've been here. There are only 2. Probably the most expensive list, though, I brought to you. So the first project is for the Hancock Expressway multi-use path. This is going to be used for a path to connect the Sand Creek Trail to Academy Boulevard there, adjacent to Hancock Expressway. It's about 2,500 linear feet. There's a map included in your packet if you need additional information. The city has received MMOF, which is Multimodal Transportation and Mitigation Option Funds, which is a state grant fund, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, which does require a 50-50 match. As it's taken so long with the grant agreement, we've been reevaluating the cost. Feel like we don't have enough monies. That's, we want to preserve the $1,008,000 for the construction piece of it, and we are proposing to fund the engineering contract with program funds for roadway safety and traffic operations, and the amount of $315,785 to Stantec Consulting. The city did go through an informal RFP process for consultants that were pre-qualified on our on-call list, and Stantec was selected. Questions on that item?
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, Carlos Pettis. Yeah, thank you for this. We were just talking about bike to work. This is actually on my route to bike here on the Sand Creek Trail, and I always have the pleasure of dodging, cement trucks here in this area. So it's an interesting area. I do have a couple of questions about the project just because of just here on the map. I'm just assuming that the multi-use trail is on the northeast side of this. There is no projects, any construction that's going to be occurring on the southwest side. Is that right? It's just one side of the road.
It is just one side of the road, but now I'm questioning if it's the north or south side of Hancock. I was thinking it was the south side, but I could be wrong about that. will
Well,
see
it would
if I
be
can-
logical to connect it with the north side, and I'll make a comment about that. But I just wanted clarification on that because it wasn't clear. That was,
I will see if I can phone a friend and get you an answer by the end of the day.
yeah. I see a lot of unusual things here. So the pedestrian traffic here is on that neighborhood from Delta on the north side. On the south side there, or the southeast or southwest side, it's just industrial area. So there's a lot of traffic, and I do see a lot of foot traffic, bicycle traffic there in the bike lanes there on Hancock. I also see that over on Astrazone too. So I'm just going to, another question here. There's no plans to deal with Astrazone Boulevard, which there are no sidewalks there for anybody there. And there's a lot of foot traffic there as well.
As of right now, I don't recall anything being proposed on the Astrazone Boulevard segment in the short term. I'd have to go and look at long-term plans about that segment.
Okay, well, again, this is a much needed. And one last question is there going to be any public process or input on this multi-use path
There
from the
will-
community, or will it just be a study only?
There will be, it's not a study, it's actually going to be
Or-
more
or design.
implementation, but I would suspect that they're going to have some engagement on that. But since you've been out in that area, there are actually a lot of, even though you think it's pretty easy just to add this on adjacent to Hancock, there's actually a lot of technical components associated with this, and there actually was concern getting this trail to fit in this area. But I was thinking it was on the south side. I could be wrong, and it could be on the north side, and I will see if I can get that clarification.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, again, just the public input. What I've heard from the public here is that it's much needed. There is a lot of foot traffic here, and a lot of people that are using this don't have cars. And
Right. Yeah.
I do see, we'll consider a very challenging demographic. This is a disadvantaged community. And so it may have some unique circumstances to take in consideration here. And I just think a public process could be benefit this project. But this is a great project, and I'm glad we have the money to do this. Or some of the money. It looks like we don't have it all, but we'll start with the design and go from there. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair. Sorry for
Yeah,
taking a lot of time
no,
there, but there's a lot of questions.
That's
about
all right.
this.
Just an additional piece of, just one second. Isn't Hancock an academy where they're making that Southern Transit a hub right in this area
Well,
right here?
eventually someday, the intent is to have a transit hub there, yes, at Hancock and Academy. I've seen two different potential options there, whether they would both be on the south side of Hancock, but whether it's on the east or the west side of Academy. I think they're leaning more towards the east side now with some of the redevelopment that's being planned with some human services type facilities also adjacent in that area. And I'm sure Brian, if he's going to join us later, he can tell us. I know he's submitted grant applications to try and get funding to advance that transit center, but I don't know that he's been successful with that yet. There he is. And it is all correct. And have you been successful yet? Okay, yeah, thanks. And he's in the one blind spot I've got in the audience. Thank you, Brian. See?
Just one comment. That comes out to $530 a foot. So, I mean, my calculations are right, so it has to be needed for $530 a foot.
Well, it absolutely isn't. And as Carlos mentioned, if you go and look at the city's demographics, both from your population makeup, but really who has vehicles and the modes of transportation used in that area, that portion of Colorado Springs has the highest modality or highest users for transit and has the highest use for both bicycles and pedestrian movements in that area. So this was really a much needed connection to really link these transit opportunities that are going to be at Hancock and Academy, along with other improvements we're putting on Academy itself, and then connected him to Sand Creek Trail to give him some more regional options.
Richard, you had a question?
Yes, I guess, as you know, I'm not particularly a trail person, but I am delighted in this particular case because the city and Gail deserve a lot of credit here, getting that multimodal state grant of $1 million to help out on this. And I think the more that we can do things like that, it makes all our funds go further and we build more, whether it's trails, whether it's bike lanes, or whether it's highways. So when the time comes, I hope I'll be able to speak quickly and make the motion to approve it.
Any other comments? All right, Gail, next one.
You guys gave me the most questions today and my shortest list. All right. This is an exciting contract to bring forward. So we're bringing a construction contract for the Academy Boulevard reconstruction for both what we refer to as the south and the north segment. The north segment is from Bijou to Airport, and then the south segment is from Fountain to Milton Proby Parkway. The way we put this package together is to try to get some economy of scale and time with our construction contractors and to bring the construction contractors early to give them a limited notice to proceed for the idea that they can start that material procurement. There's a lot of utility components in both segments, but in particular, there's some large water line relocation that needs to happen in the south segment. The city was successful in receiving 3 construction bids. The lowest construction bid was Ames Construction in the amount of $59,497,800. You can see from my memo that that is 33.3% over the engineer's estimate. I will point out, though, that a bulk of that overreach, well, we saw heavy leaning more on the utility side than we did more on the transportation side on our overreach. And if you go and look at break down our engineer's estimates without the utility pieces, the south segment is a 12% increase, and then the north segment is a 12% increase, and the south segment is 26.7 increase. We were expecting somewhere in that 18 to 20% range. So overall average, we're less than that 20%, or we're right around that 20% mark. Unfortunately, the utility side, their costs are closer to the 40 to 50% range, but that is indicative of what we are seeing in the marketplace right now. Any other questions related to that? I kind of hit that on a high level. Yes, Rick. Oh, yes, I will point out, yes, thank you. I appreciate that, Rick. We'll point out that we are paying for these 2 projects that are going to be constructed in one contract over a 3-year period. Right now, we have everything fully budgeted for the north segment, which is where we're going to give the first notice proceeded so they can start construction here in the next couple months. For the south segment, I've got just under 21 million programmed in 2023. And when you look at the overall big financial picture, I'm going to add $5.8 million into our program for 2024. And that is to cover all of our construction costs as we know them today. And I also will bring in one more construction management contract in because we have not contracted for that on the south segment as well. So that should be between $1.5 and $2.5 million. So adding the 5.8 in 2024 will give us enough monies to complete the construction in its entirety. And I have a little bit of contingency built in there, well, about $900,000 to address those projects.
So the north section is going to address the drainage along that.
Do a bijou where it,
Yeah.
that's the intent. The roadway drainage issues.
Right, roadway.
Beyond that, I can't help them.
Yeah, roadway in that bottom area down there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Other
other-
questions?
Carlos?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just other questions and just understanding where things are going kind of the long term and how it affects PPRTA 3. So originally the construction was around, I'm going to say around up $45 million. Now it's coming into 60. It's about $15 million difference there. You have here in your memo that was within the reason here because of the other bids there. Are we going to be expecting, I mean, just to kind of get a sense of this, I'm a little concerned that, our engineering estimates are coming kind of low now. And that with the 83% here with PPRTA 3, and we're looking at the numbers as far as our PPRA list. Maybe this leads into the next discussion here. Are we estimating too low now? Are all our estimates too low? Or do we have to account for inflation, material costs, labor, everything, all the above?
Yeah.
Where are we at? Where are we heading with construction costs? Because this is a pretty big delta, $15 million.
So, and I
Chunk of
talked
change.
about a lot of this last month when we
Yeah.
brought the budget amendment for. And that's why even when we talked about the Mark Shuffle and Barnes intersection, that I've taken all those large projects that we still have construction pending on and have demonstrated for what we're projected for our revenue, but if we add 20% on top of the total project cost, just not the construction costs, that we'd still be able to deliver. But to answer your question, when we get engineers' estimates, they're based on the market value typically from that previous year. And we do add escalation on there, but these are some of our first bids that we're really starting to see. We as a city are starting to see a cost, and we've kind of known that they were going to be just with what is happening in the marketplace about that 20% high on some material items. Unfortunately for us, it's our big ticket material items. It's kind of interesting what's happening in the industry, looking at the commodities that feed us. And I know we don't use lumber, but I'm going to use lumber as kind of an index because lumber tends to be a good signature material item when you look at the construction industry as a whole, and it's more related to single family residents, but it's starting to come down. In fact, it's dropped about 30% from where it was in its high about a year ago. Asphalt, we have known the asphalt products are about 50% high. So when we go to use asphalt pavement, it's not all the petroleum-based product, just the petroleum component is 50% high. But we are seeing issues when we go and talk to industry, both in the asphalt and concrete industry, is that we have materials components that are high, but they're still having challenges with big time challenges with equipment or getting replacement parts. Like, do not ask for, if an asphalt machine breaks down, we're in trouble. If a cement plant, which has been breaking down and been having problems, is affecting our supply industry. And then we've got to get operators and drivers for that. The other thing we are just starting to see the beginning of is potentially the impact of fuel prices. The fuel prices, every piece of material needs to be moved to the site, and how that gets to that site, or once it gets on site, then it has to be moved to be put in place, and just those operating costs in there. So with the trends we're seeing in the industry is in line with where we were thinking of going. Are we making adjustments to our estimates? The answer are yes, but we also are trying to look at more longer game too and trying to average it over time. This is a big blip. We've really taken advantage of 2019 pricing for 2 years. So if you think about that alone and just added 3% to it, where would you end up? And not too far off from what we're seeing on the transportation side anyway. utilities, I feel so bad for them because they're having other supply chain issues. Unfortunately, when you see that they picked up a bulk of these cost increases, when you look at it, big picture. So Carlos, I did a lot of talking. I don't know if I answered all your question, but
Yeah, it's a period of, I appreciate it. It's a period of uncertainty here. And, I've been reading, the economic forecast that we're in a period of possibly something we haven't seen in a long time, 40 years of stagflation, inflation with no productivity increases there. I just want to make sure that we're intelligent. Since we're taking this to the voters, they see inflation, they see cost increases. That's weighing on everybody's mind here. So I want to make sure that we give them our best estimates here for what the cost of these projects are, because we are going to take this to voters and they're going to say, I'm getting hit in the wallet. Why should I support this? And I just want to have a story to tell them that, yeah, this is across the board, but we also have to take care of our infrastructure, especially something like this, which in my memory, a $60 million project here is probably the most significant project that I've seen, that I think I've ever seen. I don't think I've ever seen anything more than $60 million come through here. Maybe there might have been other projects, but I'm just trying to think of something this big, So, but we have to proceed. That's what the money's for. And it's the environment we're in. Timing is everything. Our timing was not very good on this one. So you did answer my question. We just have to be smart how we proceed. And I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Yeah, you mentioned, who's got a hand up? Oh, David? Dave?
Yeah, this is Dave's. Hi, this is Dave Zelenak. Can you hear me?
Yes, barely.
not well.
Oh, okay, thanks. Let me fix this. Again, Gail, thanks. This all looks good to me. The question I have today is the same one I had, I guess, a while ago, which is about the interagency coordination. Folks have approached me through the El Paso County Highway Commission, as always, about traffic signal coordination. I think I know the answer. This is a pavement rehabilitation contract, but is it fair that I can reassure at least the El Paso County folks who've contacted me that there are improvements on the way to improving? CDOT obviously has some signals. I believe El Paso County has a number of signals, and of course the city has the bulk of the signals, but they still seem to be disconnected, uncoordinated, mainly on the South Academy portion, south of Milton Proby. And I know that's just beyond the scope of work here, but are there any signal improvements or interagency coordination initiatives as part of this?
So not necessarily associated with this project from just a signal timing standpoint, but I think, Dave, when you brought this question up, it's probably been 4 or 5 months ago, I went back to our city traffic engineer and talked with him about doing a global approach on looking at those signal timing from, I think it's Meadowbrook all the way on the west side up through Milton Proby Parkway. And then it picks up in the signal system timing. I'd have to check with them on the status of that. I know that both the county and CDOT can own and control some of those signals. We were looking to be able to take over the timing and sequencing on that. I just don't know the status of where he is on that effort, but I have heard the same thing. And I think you brought that same question up, and I have worked with Todd Frisbee in our office to address that.
Sounds good, Gail. Thank you. Yeah, I just didn't want to not have an answer for always improving signal coordination. When there's multiple
I know in the
agencies
CDOT part, we have sorry, Dave, I think I stepped over you. We have a intergovernmental agreement with CDOT that we control, I think it's 625 of their signals. So we were looking to see if we could pick up, I think there's 2 intersections where they have signals, if I remember correctly, to get them pulled in to part of that agreement. And then I know that Todd was working with the county as well.
Well, thanks,
All
Gail.
right.
No, that's good. And congratulations on moving this forward. I'm all in support of it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dave. Any other questions for Gail on the city's 2 contracts? All right. Do I hear a motion or recommendation to approve?
I make the motion to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Tamara Dipner. I second.
All right, Tamara, thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. Recommendation goes forward. I'll qualify Gail's statement about equipment. I've been waiting over a year for a piston sleeve and a piston for my motorhome engine. So they're just not available. And when a piece of equipment breaks down on the site, they got to bring in another piece of equipment or haul it away, and it sits, and they keep moving things around from site to site, which increases their setup and transportation costs. So it's hopefully this will work itself out. All right, County, Joshua.
Good morning or afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. So the first and second item that I have for the committee today is to request a recommendation and to present the request for 2 line item transfers. Both line item transfers coming from the Old Meridian McLaughlin Roundabout project. So that project is substantially complete. So we're looking to transfer out the remaining $745,816.41 from that project in 2 line item transfers. The first line item transfer going to the New Meridian Falcon Park and Ride project in the amount of $495,816.41. And this will allow for the project there. That project well is substantially complete. We're finishing up some additional work to the park and ride, lighting at the roundabout, some sidewalk repairs, some pedestrian improvements, handrails on the sidewalk to account for some unexpected slopes, and general cleanup and punch list work. So that dollar amount will allow us to complete that project here in the next 2 months, hopefully. And the second request is a line item transfer in the amount of $250,000 even to the main security and or security main security Fontaine project. So these are 2 separate PPRTA 2 projects that we have, and that will be my following item is the contract awards for those projects. So those are 2 projects, in-house design projects that the county has done, but we are contracting those out as a single contract for both construction and CM. So we've been pretty lucky. The bids that we received for that project are pretty much in line with our engineer's estimate. The $250,000 will allow us to make up a $136,000 approximate shortfall with the additional contingency for that project. So those are the 2 line item transfers we're requesting from Old Meridian to New Meridian and security projects. Any questions?
Any questions on those? So those are the only 2 you've got.
The line item transfer is correct, yeah.
Okay.
And then I'll follow up that if there are no more questions on that with the request to recommend the award for the security main security Fontaine project. So in the packet after the 2 line item transfers, we have a construction contract and purchase order for Sturgeon Electric for $1,885,522. And this is to perform the construction on both the projects. In the following pages, there's a map that shows the exact location. So you'll see in the map why it made sense for us to bid those under single contract. And the second contract we're hoping to award would be for a professional services contract to FHU for construction management, inspection, and materials testing in the amount of $204,985. And that does assume a recommendation and approval for the line item transfer as well. So they're all kind of working together there.
Yeah, that Security Avenue Main Street intersection could use some improvement.
Oh, absolutely. So signal replacement, pedestrian improvements, ADA accessibility, some minor drainage improvements. Very proud of that project because we've had some very dedicated staff internally doing the design. And like I said, luckily we didn't fall casualty to some of the increased prices that we're seeing on some other projects. So our estimate was pretty well in line with what we received from our vendors.
Good.
Any questions on either of those
Rick's got-
2 contracts?
I'd request a separate motion and approval first for the line item transfers, then for the contracts.
Yeah, that's fine. Anybody object to that? Good. All right. So let's hear a recommendation for approval of the county's request for 2 line item transfers out of the Meridian Road project to the aforementioned projects.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Richard, thank you. Any second? Okay, Rick, thank you. Any other discussion on the line item transfers? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, there we go. All right, let's go on to the the security wide field, the two projects, the capital program, Main Street Security Boulevard, those projects the county just funded. I hear a motion to approve the county's request.
So moved, Chairman.
Thank you, Emily. Second,
I'll second it.
thank you, Carlos. Any further discussion on that project? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Great, very good, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Josh. All right, next, Green Mountain Falls. Town of Green Mountain Falls contract request to borrow from the capital reserve. Who's going to address that one? Who's on?
This is Becky from Green Mountain Falls. Can you hear me?
Yes, Peggy, thank you. Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate it. So we have brought this to you before you today for consideration regarding our Stilling Basins A-list project and the approval of two contracts. The first being Wilson and Company Engineering, Wilson and Company for our engineering in the sum of $90,105 for that engineering component, and the $12,750 for the construction management portion of this project. And additionally, the Iron Mountain construction contract, which came in, not surprisingly, after hearing other people's projects, also overbid significantly. So the estimated total of those two contracts is $538,230. We currently have $341,233 of approved funding for this project. So additionally, we have brought for your consideration a request to borrow $250,000 from the Pprta capital reserve, which the town pledges to repay through its 2023 and 2024, if necessary, annual capital allocation. This request is sought because the project bid coming in over budget, and detailed in the memo is a breakout of that anticipated funding required to complete the project. From that funding budget, we do have a significant amount to the tune of just over $150,000 that is reimbursable through our agreement with Colorado Springs Utilities. So really our shortfall for this project really ends up only being anticipated at about $87,000. However, just to be able to keep cash flow going through this project while we are seeking reimbursements and requests so that we're not having to take out a loan from our bank. That's why you will see that larger request than actually what we anticipate the funding need is going to be. Was that well explained? And do you have any questions about that? How we came up with that?
Just point out, borrowing from the reserve is not unprecedented. It's happened before, and they just allocate their capital allocation in the future years to pay that back. So for some of the newer members that may not have seen this, that's not unprecedented. Any questions for Becky? Okay, all those in favor of approving Green Mountain Falls request, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, don't have a.
Sorry, jumping ahead. Do I have a motion to approve Green Mountain Falls request for? All right, Ryan, you second. Ryan second. Rick Hoover made the motion. Now, any further discussion? All those in favor of request, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Item number 7A. Yes, 7A City Transit. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Brian Vituli. I'm the Transit Services Manager with the City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metropolitan Transit, and I'll be presenting your monthly report. But first, I wanted to introduce Lan Rao. She, with the retirement of Craig Blewett last week, Lan will be serving as our acting Transit Services Manager until we fill that position. And Lan's been with Transit for nearly 15 years. No stranger to the PPRTA, and is vital to our leadership team. And we're in very good hands for the many months that it will probably take to fill this position.
And
So,
she's the money lady.
absolutely. Yeah. So you'll see Lan occasionally popping in here, mostly probably just checking on me. So. So now to the monthly transit report for our fixed route operation for the month of May. We provided nearly 178,000 trips during that time. That is just about 13% higher than the previous month, but still quite a bit low compared to May of 2019 pre-COVID. We are operating nearly all of our services. We're still not operating some of those high frequency routes. We need still a fair amount of operators to restore all of that service, but we are getting better. And it's going to be hopefully by the end of summer where we'll be able to restore some of that service. But a number of factors that's kind of correlating to the higher ridership here is normally there is a seasonal bump in the summertime. There are more people out, more people using transit. I just mentioned our fixed route contractor has been able to hire more operators, so we are able to get more service out there. And I think there's higher level of rider confidence that transit is safe, and hopefully this is a good sign going forward. For our ADA powered transit services, we provided about 9,400 trips in May of 2022. That's up about 23% from May of 2021. And those services are, out of all of our services, paratransit service seems to be rebounding the quickest. So that's a good sign. The specialized paratransit taxi choice option, this is still a service that is kind of struggling to rebound. We did discontinue it during for many months during the pandemic. And we are still kind of keeping a close eye on this and whether we'll continue with this in the future or not. But for now, it's for the month of May, there were 47 trips during that month. And finally, for our Vanpool services, we operated 7 vans in May of 2022 with 36 active riders, making about 880 trips. So that's up 11% from May of 2021. Now, just a project update. Didn't really get a chance to give the details last month, but you approved the PPRTA budget amendment in early June, and the board approved it at their meeting. But just wanted to give you a briefing on what we're looking to do with that $680,000 in extra money that we're getting for additional transit services. So we're looking to add service to Route 35, which operates from the Pikes Peak Community College's Centennial Campus off of South Academy. That's one of our major, probably our second or third major transfer centers. Travels ultimately up Las Vegas, serves the county criminal justice center and a halfway house. We were approached by the sheriff's office, and there is a really good work release program there that this route actually wasn't serving properly. We've struggled over the years with resources. Now we have resources, and that route was a low ridership route, so we struggled on throwing extra resources onto a struggling route. But we've also had some issues with the turnaround location at the Criminal Justice Center. We basically lost our turnaround on the property there. So we had to do a lengthy detour to turn the bus around. So after being approached by the county sheriff office, we are going to be extending it north to Alta Hotel, which is the old Hotel Elegante. Gives it a really good destination on the north. It's very close to Circle and Janitel, where we have another Route 15 that could provide some transfer opportunities. And I believe Alta Hotel is being turned into affordable housing.
Yes.
So it's kind of a win-win situation all around. We're going to be adding evening service on Route 35 and Saturday service because the work release program operates during all of those times. So it's a really good, example of a good partnership between several organizations, and this is a route that runs in the unincorporated parts of El Paso County. So we're really happy that we'll be able to do this. And we're hoping to implement that this fall with our fall service change. So that's something we can do pretty quickly. Second item is we're looking to add extra service, later evening service on Independence Day. And, based on the timing of this, it didn't happen just this past Monday, but for next Independence Day, we'll be ready. So we're looking to operate service until probably 11:30 at night. Normally our system shuts down around 9:30. This will give an opportunity for customers or other folks in the community who want to go see fireworks. Hoping that we have them next year and they can get around the community using our system. And the final item is Route 3 travels from downtown Colorado Springs to Manitou Springs. That is one of our higher ridership routes, similar to the other routes that we have 15-minute service on. So we're looking to increase the frequency from 30 minutes to 15 minutes on weekdays on that route. And we do need 2 new vehicles to operate that. But we were able to submit a grant, and it won't be approved probably until August by the PPACG board, but we submitted for funding for 2 battery electric buses for the multimodal and mitigation opportunity fund that the state has. And it's looking like normally the case is there are more projects, more need than there is funding. And it's looking like everybody who submitted for funding will get their projects funded. So don't want to speak ahead of this because the board still doesn't need to approve this, but it's looking pretty good. So once, it's kind of a lengthy process. We need to procure the buses, they need to build them, get delivered. So it could be a little bit of time before we implement that 15-minute service on Route 3.
Why just weekdays?
Well, it's already got good frequency, weekday evenings. It's got 30-minute service. Ridership levels don't really warrant 15-minute service
So
across the
weekends,
board.
weekends too.
It's got 30-minute service on the weekends. Yep. Yep. So, and this is, Manitou, Colorado Avenues, they've been kind of our high frequency corridors for many, many years, kind of like Academy Boulevard and Platte and Nevada. And so this is a good step in that direction. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Brian? Rick?
This is kind of out of the box, but have you guys ever looked at a game bus with the express lanes going north and south? And you have a parking lot up there at Briargate to just put a game bus for the football games?
Well, I know that the state has the Mustang service, and there are ways to get from here to Denver for.
Are they designated to the field?
Not dedicated, I don't believe. I think there are some other services like that up in that area, but there isn't a dedicated Broncos bus that Mustang operates. But I think with, CDOT just made an announcement a couple months ago, they're going to be adding a lot of service on Mustang. So it's going to be easier to commute to Denver, but also go up there for recreation or games or.
Well, I happen to think of it because The last time I went to a game, I've used a bus and they took me right to the gate. And then after the game, they went right out the gate into the bus.
Yeah.
And that's the way to go to a game.
There's a bus that leaves from the Woodman Park and Ride, but it must be, there's a group of people piling in it a lot of days, but it's not a bus thing. It must be a contracted or a private party group of people. But
Yeah, yeah.
there is a bus that loads at Woodman Park and Ride, but I do remember those dedicated buses years ago that used to go straight up there. That's a pretty cool thing. Saves with the drunk driving.
Thanks. Yeah.
I've got just a question and a comment. It's good to see the new electric buses out and running around. They look kind of, it's not hard to spot them.
Right.
I've been reading in some other locations, the federal money that came forward for transit during the pandemic and whatnot, it's beginning to run out. And with ridership still low, is creating some financial issues for some of these people. And I was reading, I think somebody had deals, I think sent some RTDs having some issues too. But if I remember correct, did you guys use that money for operations or did you use it for capital improvements?
We are using it for the first 3 years of operations of our downtown shuttle.
Downtown shuttle, okay.
Yeah, and no, you're right. We've been hearing that too, that, what a lot of agencies thought was a huge plus in funding, with the cost of doing business increasing, that huge amount of extra funding isn't really that huge. And, there are no doubts a lot of larger agencies that are still trying to rebound and are still struggling financially. We seem to be in a really good position here, but that was how we used our ARPA money for the first 3 years of the downtown shuttle.
But not necessarily as much on the main route. So this is more just the downtown shuttle thing.
Right.
Good.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And we're hoping that, that's kind of seed money that can kind of prove that this is a really high functioning service. We're seeing ridership levels increase by the week on that. And we haven't really had our full kickoff or ribbon cutting yet. So, by funding it for 3 years, hopefully it'll build a case for its continuation, and other organizations and other parties will step in to help fund it going forward.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Brian, Richard?
Brian, I am an advocate for mass transit. But what is worrying me a great deal about this situation we have in the Colorado Springs area is we're more or less through the pandemic. Most places don't wear a mask anymore. Traffic on automobiles has picked back up again. It doesn't look that much different between today and 2021. And we look at your charts and okay, it shows improvement from last year, but both years compared to 2019 are rotten. And there's no other way to put, I hope that's polite. I could use other words if I were trying to solve the problem. I don't know what to do, what you can do. I'm not criticizing you for anything. I think, and what worries me is that I think we may have, and I would blame the pandemic for it, but I think we may be facing a change in the attitude of the residents of the Colorado Springs in using mass transit. And I don't know how that can be addressed, but I think you all are making your best efforts and it's just not turning them back. And here I maintain, I can see how the pandemic would have caused people not to want to associate with people other than like their own family members in a car. I can see how that would do it. But what I can't see is why it's not coming back. You know, I think if this continues for another year, I'm not sure what direction things need to be going. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to respond. Not sure there's enough time for that, but you know, I disagree. You know, I think until we get our 4 highest ridership routes to full capacity and operating at the high frequency that we normally operate, I think that's going to make a huge difference. The thing that's still challenging for us is getting enough bus operators to operate that service. So I don't want to prematurely say that we're going to get back to where we were, because we're not there yet and we are still struggling. But you know, I think people's work patterns have changed, and you know, some cities are rebounding and some transit agencies are almost back to where they were, which is great news. But others are still not there yet. And I think so until we get all of our service operating, you know, there's really nothing we can do until that happens. But you know, the final thing is whether we get back to that level that we were at before. I mean, there are people out there that are struggling and who need this service. So this is a vital service to the community, and we'll keep providing it because there are people that need it. And hopefully we will rebound. And but the signs are there that we are rebounding and we're getting there. It's just a matter of time as to how long.
The impact of hybrid is to be determined. Hybrid work environment on public transit. You know, people that used to commute every day, now are only commuting 2 or 3 times a week. And as long as that model stays active or in some cases grows, I've read that some companies are not going back to the high-rise office building full of booths. They have found they can cut operating costs, keep the employees happy, working from home, pay their internet. It's a heck of a lot cheaper in terms of operating costs. So how that impacts public transit in cities, Washington, DC struggling with it. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia are struggling with it. So yeah, that's to be determined.
Right. Yeah, and I think also, you know, the value of what this organization does, this committee and the board. I mean, here we got $680,000 to add more service. That's vital to the community. You know, that's the kind of support that we need going forward if we are ever to rebound. And you know, getting people who come into town to ride a free downtown shuttle in Colorado Springs, you know, some of them probably have never taken a bus before. You know, if we can help give them a positive experience and say, hey, it's really pretty cool and pretty easy to ride transit, you know, maybe they'll either ride it here or go back to their community and ride it. And I also think that, you know, the efforts that we're making with this extra funding to improve our system is just what we need to continue to improve our services, make our services more attractive to people who, you know, are lifelong car drivers. You know, if you can have services that operate every 15 minutes where you don't need a hand schedule to check, you just show up at the stop and take it and go, that's huge. And you can start to shift the culture. And yeah, there's no doubt about it, Colorado Springs is pretty car friendly and people love their cars, and that's a main mode of getting around here. But you know, the work we're doing since the Great Recession has helped a lot, and hopefully it'll continue to help as we get out of this, and funding from Pprta is critical to that.
Denver's looking at cutting routes just because of funding.
So we can actually say that we won up Denver, you know, here, right? So yeah.
There you go. All right. Any other questions, Brian? Good comments. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, item 7B, capital PPRTA 3 capital projects list. So Rick, you want to start it off or you're just going to turn it over to Gail? Oh. Oh, no, I've already, back on the schedule. We're gonna stick with it. Yeah. Okay, Gail, you want to start off with the city's project list, or does Rick want to introduce this?
I'll do a 30-second introduction. As the CAC is aware, we've been working probably well over a year to get to this point to develop the PPRTA 3 capital project lists for the 5, now 6-member governments. This is the 3rd and final review for the CAC. The board will have its final review next Wednesday, and then at their August 10 meeting, they will look at the final clean ballot with the ballot narrative merged with the project list. But at their meeting next week, it's not going to be a merged list. Okay. Per IV. Anyway, that's my understanding. So this is the 3rd and final opportunity for the CAC to review the 6-member government list. The I think Rama's the same. I think Callahan's the same. Each of the member governments, starting with the city, can highlight any changes they've made since your 2nd review last month. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gail.
Gail Sturgeon, City of Colorado Springs. The city's list as presented has been modified slightly since you've seen it passed, but it does still contain 24 named projects and 21 capital programs. The major differences are previously on other lists you've seen, it said plat and boulder improvements that include consideration improvements on both those roadways. I'm sure if you've read the press, you know that one of the options being discussed was potentially a one-way couplet. That has since been modified to just be Platte Avenue improvements, and that will be focused on work on the 4 bridges in that segment that run between Wasatch and Circle Drive, along with some intersection enhancement. It's at Union Boulevard. With that change, we did do a revised cost estimate on that, and that allowed us to have additional funding to add the Old Ranch Road from Voyager Parkway to this is to Lexington. Most of the roadway improvements are really would be from Voyager to the bridge at Kettle Creek, and then restriping from Kettle Creek up to that Lexington intersection. And the last major change, in case you haven't been aware of what's going on in the paper, is the Constitution Avenue feasibility study, which was previously shown on the A list, has been removed, and then the engineering component for Constitution Avenue, which is previously shown on the B list, has been removed. In other words, we're still within that fiscal constraint proposed by the board at 83% of the projected revenue. We've hit a lot of it in more detail in the past. I'd be happy to talk about it in more detail if you'd like, if there's questions.
There we go. I was just looking at it and it looks like a really nice list now. But anyway, I noticed that I think there's 9 or 10 bike and trail projects on the A list.
Yeah.
And I am a trail person. As a matter of fact, I got into this mess by, heading up the Rock Island Trail. And so I'm a trail person, but I've listened to a lot of people out there and not everybody is. And I'm wondering if we need to either maybe look at some of these trail projects and put them on the B list and take something and put on the A list, or plan to really control the narrative to the voter on that and bicycles. The on-street bicycles, just, I mean, that is a spark plug. But I'm just wondering if maybe that is, my suggestion is either one of the two, is to de-emphasize the maybe put them at the bottom of the list where they don't read that far down, or to change the
Did you talk to
narrative
the
to where
mayor?
we control it.
So let me address that. So most of, with the exception of one project, everything you're seeing on there where it says trail are programs. In the current RTA authorization, there were 7 trail programs. This one, there is 9. The Parks Department wanted to add, I'm not going to remember the 8th one from what they had previously. At the request of Public Works and as a result of Connect COS and a lot of the public engagement that was associated with this, we had a lot of requests for the Midland Trail Corridor. And in fact, Carlos, I think at one of the meetings, you were even the one that suggested to look at it as a regional opportunity, because that does transect 3 different jurisdictions, the city, the county, and Manitou Springs. The only trail specific project in there, it's not a program, is another Midland Trail Corridor from, I think it's 21st Street to 29th Street, to look at filling in that connection. I've actually, the mayor, when we reviewed the list, brought up the same question. We could combine that project into that program, so you're taking trail off there one time, but we do think it's still really important to be able to leave those other trail programs on there. And they have pretty limited funding. If you go and look at it, they get $9.5 million over 10 years in what's programmed today. And it talks a lot of specifics. There is a lot more detail, which is why this is posted on our website in the second part of this. If you, Jessica, could you go scroll down to the larger spreadsheet?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, and maybe go to that Midland Trail Corridor, because they all pretty much say the same. So it's that one says it's multi-jurisdictional, but what the Parks Department does with that money is they use it to go and leverage and get grant funds. So they're getting anywhere from 50% to 80%, and actually 50% to 90% match in federal funds for those dollars. You go and complete projects on the trails. That's how it's going to be used. Now, I get the understanding that there may be some pushback and from the community, but the reason why I mentioned there was 7 on there before, 9 now, because they have been shown in the past. So it should not be something new, but if we feel like there's, I'd be happy to take recommendations back to our city council. For this.
I'd rather have them. I just want to make sure that we control the narrative, because perception is reality, and whether, you know, whether they're a major project or whether they're in low funding, the number of times voter sees it on there, if it's a negative impression to him or her, then it's going to be a negative 9 times. Where if we control the narrative and explain to them and make sure that they understand that these aren't taking away from the extension of Woodman Road or Black Forest Road to Shoup in the B list. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep them on there, but make sure we control the narrative of it.
I think that point's well taken. That's one of the reasons why we've crafted the language as well as I think we can. But I think that's going to be important to communicate when the public engagement or public information portion of the campaign, which we only provide information for, happens, that will need to be communicated to our citizens. I do think it's also important too that they do have some attraction to those folks that are non-motorized and have interests in improving the active living lifestyle that Colorado Springs is known for as well. So it's your point's taken that we need to find the right balance, but we do think it's important to support the Parks Department and having those trail connections with these programs. And again, over 10 years, right now it's $9.5 million planned. So they can stretch a dollar like nobody else.
That doesn't include converting 1 lane of research to a bike lane, right? No, not just.
This is Ann in Green Mountain Falls. Could I
Hey,
ask?
Ann. Go ahead,
Hi.
Ann.
I didn't quite understand, Gail, what you were saying about Platt and Constitution. Did you say, I know that those were very controversial with the public. Did you say they've been taken off the list, or what was it?
So Constitution has been taken off the list.
Uh-huh.
And the Boulder component on Platt Avenue has been taken off, and the definition of the plan project description is different. So Jessica, would you scroll down to the Platt? It's down probably on page 4 or 5. The good news is it's in alphabetical order. Oh, there we go. So now, so the previously item 121, and hopefully you can see this, and used to say Platt and
120.
Boulder improvements from Wasatch Circle Drive. The end Boulder piece has been removed, and it's focused on operational condition improvements to include the bridges in the Union intersection.
Well, I just didn't understand. You know, there was talk about extending it clear into the city, you know, as a east-west corridor from.
That was the Constitution Avenue extension, which is no longer on here.
But Platt, somehow I've missed that.
That was the news the week prior.
So that was, okay. Okay, well, I was just keeping up with, you know, what the public thinks, that's all.
Yep, no, thank you. I appreciate the questions, Ann.
Thank you.
Richard?
When it comes to our recommendations, and if we have a motion and all of that, I'm going to have to vote no. I support the Colorado Springs staff and what they originally proposed. And I understand the pressures that have come on to our elected representatives, and they have to make the best decision in their judgment. I recognize all of that. But I think we are setting ourselves in a very bad position in doing what has been at the moment decided by the city council in some major east-west transportation improvements. It just is I think it is a major mistake. And I have never been an elected official, and I will never be one. And I don't have to make those decisions. But I've been a staff person in transportation all my life. And sometimes I've been in charge, and so most of the time I've been supporting. So I am going to object for this reason. But I do understand why it may be necessary, and I do respect every member of the Colorado Springs City Council. I don't disrespect a single one of them. I just think it's from a transportation, a regional transportation in particular, I think it's a bad mistake. Thank you.
Rick? No, I'm sorry, I hadn't gotten there yet. So who had the hand? Scott, you got your hand up?
Yep, I've got my hand up too. This is Dave Z.
Okay, go ahead, Dave, since you got it, and then Scott after Dave.
Oh, thanks. Hey, two thoughts, folks. One is I wholeheartedly agree with Richard. I'm not sure that I'll vote against this, though, because of Constitution, but I can't underscore, I think I even went on record last time as endorsing the east-west improvement project. So like Richard, I would share his comments that I'm sorry to see it go. And I think that there still needs to be some major addressing of an east-west thoroughfare across this community and region. The question I had, Gail, was actually about project number 483. And I don't know, did you want to bounce to the Group B list, or do you want to hold those comments and my question about the project on the Group B for later, or are you just doing A now?
Can you, you said 433, Dave?
That's actually 483. It's the roundabout at 8th Street. If you could scroll down there on the.
It's on
the screen,
page
please.
4 of 8. Is that 8th Street and Cheyenne Boulevard roundabout?
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. So I'd like to suggest maybe a slight modification, not to the project necessarily, but I think as one of our colleagues pointed out, talking about the narrative of that project. I actually had a number of phone calls about that one, oddly enough, and please don't get me wrong. I support the project's concept. There's no bigger supporter of roundabouts than me. The comments and concerns that I've been hearing, though, from the public are related, oddly, surprisingly, and I didn't see this coming, to fire evacuation. And I know that's a hot, no pun intended, that's really a hot topic in this community. I happen to live actually south of the area that would use that, so I have no personal vested interest in it for whatever that's worth. But the concern I had was that there's a concern that installing a roundabout at that location would reduce the capacity of the intersection. I'm pretty sure. In fact, let me just ask you if you'd kindly go on the record and confirm for me that there's no intention to reduce the capacity. And even beyond that, I'd like to suggest a slight modification in the moniker or the naming nomenclature for that, just to include capacity enhancements / roundabout. So we make it crystal clear that you're not going to reduce capacity. One of the citizens there even shared with me a 2010, surprisingly, PPACG fire evacuation study. Didn't know it existed. I never saw the 2010 PPACG study, but in fact, they did confirm. I've looked at it, and the volume to capacity ratio indicates bumper to bumper traffic on 8th Street during a 2010 fire evacuation scenario. I'm sure that's even worse today. And so I'd have to say that the citizens' concerns about choking down traffic when already a 12-year-old PPACG study confirmed there's no capacity in that vicinity. You can't make it worse. I can't support it unless there's a confirmation that you're not going to make the capacity problem, the restriction, any worse than it is today.
Okay, I'll address the capacity and operational issues first, Dave, and then we can talk about if you want to propose modifications back
Okay.
to our city council. So first of all, the intent would not be to reduce capacity. In fact, and Dave, I know you're aware of this, and I'm sure others as well in the business, that the installation of a roundabout would actually improve the operational capacity of the intersection as a whole. And I would have to say in the scenario, whether it was a fire evacuation or not, because if it was fire evacuation, you're going to have emergency services out there, essentially making it a free flowing turn. There isn't going to be a stop condition, or they're going to be manually controlling the stop if folks are coming out. Both the roundabout opportunity keeps your operational abilities a lot higher than if it was a stop controlled situation. But the intent's not to reduce the capacity on that segment at all. If you have now, so that's one, that's just stressing the operational consideration. And Dave, I know that you understand this, but if you want to propose some modifications to that language, I would actually, instead of what you proposed, if you wanted to change it, is intersection improvements, not knowing exactly what those would be, and then they can do a full traffic analysis and demonstrate that if that project were to move forward.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Yes, something that improves the intersection operations, as opposed to implying, no, we're going to choke off traffic and make an evacuation scenario even worse than it is. So yeah, if you can suggest that or do that or offer a pathway to kind of just clarify that, that's the only comment I had.
Thank you, Dave. Scott, you had your hand up.
Yes, kind of piling on to what Dave and Richard have said. I do think it's kind of short-sighted. You know, I moved to this community in the early 2000s. We were talking about east-west mobility then. Both of these corridors were identified way back then as corridors that were likely going to be needed for east-west connectivity. And we basically, the public pressure has cut the legs out from under engineering. I'm wondering does city engineering have other ideas of how we can try to get east-west mobility if these two controversial projects are seemingly off the table?
So we are going to continue to look at options as we close out Connect COS towards the end of this year and the beginning of next year, Scott.
Okay. And by the way, I did the analysis of that 8th Street roundabout, and the roundabouts operate at level of service A, where the signal operates at level of service C.
Okay. Rick?
Just a comment on the east-west. Maybe I was going to mention it when we got to the county, but we're supposed to, the developers are supposed to develop research all the way out east to Meridian. And we have a projected 2 Woodman from the city. Perhaps what we ought to do is put some pressure on the developers to do what they're supposed to and build the roads so we can maintain them. So they're in the bucket to, as I understand it, to complete research out east, and they're not doing it. And that would certainly make a big difference in the east-west. And the thing of it is, research is all backloaded. So you're not putting traffic at somebody's front step.
I'd like to make just a comment on, I was gonna not say anything until Scott mentioned a certain word. I participated in it on the Platte Avenue corridor study. And I'm also a participant in the Connect COS City Long Range Transportation Planning project. And the tragedy, in my personal opinion, on Platte Avenue is the public was misinformed. The Boulder Street one-way Platte Avenue was one of 3 options for that section of Platte Avenue. Platte Avenue has 4 identified corridors because there's 4 distinct characteristics that are different on Platte Avenue from Powers into town. And and so the one-way Boulder thing was, somebody jumped on that and took away a lot of great improvements that were not only aesthetically good for the community, that the community did have input on. There was plenty of open forums and opportunity to provide, and they jumped on one concept and didn't even get that right, and has changed public opinion on a great project and a great study that it was identifying a lot of really good things for Platte Avenue. Because Platte Avenue, as we all have talked about, as growth continues on Mark Sheffel out on 24, and the filling in of that corridor between Mark Sheffel and the south end of Banning Lewis Ranch there, as that fills in, Platte is going to become a major, and already is a major survey. And the traffic studies that have been done on Platte Avenue, most of that traffic is coming into downtown or peeling off north and south before it gets here. And so they were looking at the volume increases in terms of how to do that. Yes, the concerns about access to the hospital and all of that stuff were all discussed, and the right people. We have EMS, we have all kinds of people that sit on that committee that were providing input. And it's just a shame that the public jumped on bad, incomplete information and changed the scope of that project, because I think it would have made a really nice thing in a lot of ways. So anyway, I've said my piece. I've spent a lot of time, and Gail has been part of those, and a major part of those. But anyway, Gail, I've got a couple of questions. So just some quick questions on a couple of other projects, if I may. Cascade Avenue, I'm sorry, not Cascade. 30th Street corridor improvements between Mesa and Garden of the Gods. They're finishing the south end of that 30th Street now, from Garden of the Gods down to Fillmore. But is anything going to be done on that section between Mesa and Garden of the Gods before RTA 3? I mean, I know you got the bike trail that's to the east side of that, but is
Just want to
any,
make sure, are you talking about on Mesa itself?
no, this, well, it says 30th Street corridor improvements, is project
Oh,
60.
yes. So the answer is no.
Okay, all right. On the, it's a modernization and safety northwest sub area. It's bounded by Union, Austin Bluffs. It's that curvy section of road from Austin Bluffs north to Academy. I read the description. I think that certainly needs to do that. Those communities are about built out, so you can't, it's not a whole lot of more capacity in there. But that road is wearing out pretty bad. And I don't know how you could eliminate some of those curves unless you straighten out and take away somebody's backyard. So I'm just kind of curious what the scope of that is,
Yeah.
if you know at this point.
I'm trying to pull it up on my sheets, but I can just tell you.
Page 2 of 8. I'm looking at the horizontal, I'm looking at the one with the descriptions.
Yep, me too.
And it's number P111.
So in that area, they're going to be looking more at multimodal improvements in that area. So
Okay.
you're right, with where the street alignments are through there, would not anticipate any changes in that area.
Okay.
But if there's opportunities to put side path in that area or shared use path opportunities, because there's not a lot of great connectivity unless you're in an automobile, and even in an automobile, it's a little wonky through that area. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yep, thank you. Okay. On the next page or a couple of pages, where he gets into the B list a little bit, you've got Cascade, Mark Dabbling Boulevard connection on the north end of Cascade there. You've got the designs and the construction split. One of them is 108, and then project 108, and then the construction is a separate line item, but further back in the list. And I'm just curious why you're splitting of design and construction.
So yeah, it has to do with money. So the design portion is on the A list and construction's on the B list.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a very expensive project just from our original cost estimates. I think it was like in the $55 million range, if I'm remembering correctly. It's actually would be a huge improvement for our transportation network. If we could have that north-south connection through that area. It's going to provide relief actually to Nevada.
Yes.
And provide some other, it actually helps with some of the east-west stuff, but gives you more north-south options to get to the roads that do go east-west, but it's just expensive. There used to be a bridge there. My understanding is that bridge washed out in the 70s during a flood. It's actually technically very complicated because to put that bridge back in there, you're going over Templeton Gap and Monument Creek in that area. So we still think it's important to explore that connection because it would be really good for our transportation network. But we want to go through the engineering component of it, see if we can use that due diligence in advance to see if we can capture some federal funding to come and do that.
Okay. That's all the questions I had. Carlos, you got it?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Carlos here. Just some questions here. By the way, I believe that bridge, it washed out in the 1930s. The one that goes across Monument Creek, the one there for Cascade that would cross into Mark Dabbling. I think it was the 30s, a while back. Anyways, my question had to do with this had been taken off the list. This is the amended list. I know the bus rapid transit or the Old North End, there was that transportation study. I know it had been moved off, but I just wanted to confirm that that's not buried in here somewhere and I'm just missing it. So the North End Nevada or the Old North End or North Nevada transit study, and maybe Brian would be able to answer this, but I just want to see if it's in
Brian
here.
and I have worked on this issue a lot, so
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll jump in. If
I mean, all it is
just
just clarification. I just want to see, is it still here or not? And
So
that's
there
going to
is
be a good
not-
question from the citizens. Hey, is it buried in here and we don't know about it, or is it explicit item?
Okay, so the Nevada and rapid transit or enhanced transit, because it's had a couple of names, project is not shown as an individual project list. We do have an enhanced transit services program that it could include a variety of different enhanced transit things from stops to vehicles on all of our corridors identified and Connect COS to include Nevada Academy and Platte.
What's the number of that project? Just trying to. Yeah, and I do understand it has gone through
It does
several
not have a
iterations. I'm
number.
just
It's-
trying to keep up.
Yeah, it doesn't have a number, but the
Oh.
projects are in alphabetical order.
Oh, okay. And
'Cause
the
the project is
traffic service
gone.
enhancements phase 1. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the one, or fleet. Okay. So if someone was to ask about North Nevada, it's part of a comprehensive analysis. We understand the concerns from the neighbors. Again, going back to selling it, we want to make sure it's not a name specific project, but it's part of a global effort as far as our enhancements related to transit.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
I'll be quiet, not say anything if the mic is on. All right, any other questions from any of the members for Gail on the city's PPRTA 3 projects? All right, good, thank you. Josh, you want to address the counties?
Absolutely. Again, Josh Palmer, interim county engineer, El Paso County. I'd like to thank Gail for going first. It always makes my job much easier because our list hasn't changed, I don't think, much at all since we got the recommendation. So I'd appreciate last month. So I'd like to thank the committee for the approval last time. It made a big difference going before the PPRTA board, and we took it to our board of county commissioners a few weeks ago, and they approved the draft list as well. I think if I recall, we still have the 4 programs, 15 projects. I think the only differences from what you may have seen last time around is it's now in alphabetical order, so it's not in any order of priority. I think we changed the name of the Stapleton Briargate. It was Briargate Stapleton, but in order to make the list more appealing, we swapped Stapleton and Briargate around. And then I think the only other 2 changes were officially putting Woodman Road and Eastonville onto the A list. So that was part of our discussion last time, was the change from the 75% to 83%. And that had allowed us to officially move those 2 projects onto the A list, again, in alphabetical order, but they were the 2 projects that kind of on the cusp if we were going with the typical 75% planning of projected revenue. So I think those, other than that, our list is the same. Nothing has changed. And we've gone, like I said, we've gone before our board of county commissioners who approved the draft list a few weeks ago.
Any questions for Josh on counties list? Carlos?
Yeah, Carlos again. Yeah, thank you very much, Josh, for the information there. And just as a clarification, I believe I know what the answer is here, but just for my edification here, we have the state, federal, the discretionary grant match fund. That's a capital A list item. I don't see that on the B list, but I do believe the intent is to have that also as a B list item for the county as well. A phase 1 and a phase 2, or are you just planning to just, and again, I don't believe it's intended just to be an A list item, but you'll roll over to a B list item.
Well,
when we get to that point.
it's possible that that program could fund B list projects. It's possible. Those programs were designed to give us flexibility in how we spend money. And one of the ways could be to address B list projects, but the intent is to give us flexibility to address projects that may or may not rise to the level of a full-on project that would require approval by the taxpayers, but it gives us flexibility similar to how the city of Colorado.
It's just not listed here. And was that just an oversight or was that by design?
It was by design. Yeah.
Okay, so it differs from the city's discretionary funds. It doesn't line up with the state's, the city's, because they do have a phase 1 for an A and a phase 2 for the B, but you only have it for the A. So there's a little bit of difference there between the city and the county's list. So I just wanted to clarify that was intended, and it looks like Rick may have had a comment about
we
that.
may both have a comment. So go ahead, Rick.
Since it is on the city's list, I think that'll, as a B, that'll get it on the final list as a B.
Yeah, but it doesn't need to be 2 grant match programs in order for the county or the city to use it. So if it's carried on the cities in the B, the county can participate in that fund without having it be duplicate or a second line item on the ballot, I think is what Rick's saying. Did I interpret that right? That's what I was gonna say. Because it's got to be shown in the B list in order to take advantage of it, which is kind of your point. But if the city's got it and all member governments can use that fund, it's not member specific, then we've covered that concern. That was my reading of that.
Yeah, that was my reading too. I just
Okay.
wanted clarification because sometimes, you'll see in the A list and B list items, parentheses, Colorado Springs or Manitou Springs, or I believe when the merge occurs, and I understand they're in the process of merging the lists together. When we have that opportunity, we'll double check to make sure it's there. But since it's not here, I just wanted clarification that was there an intent to actually avail themselves to a B list item for the state and federal discretionary grant funds? And the answer is yes, even though it's not shown on this list.
Right. I caught it as I was going through as well. So that's good catch. Anybody online got any comments for the county's list? Josh, were you done?
I'm done on the
Okay.
updates. Yeah. So if there's any additional questions.
Not seeing any. Okay, thank you. Becky, oh, wait a minute, hold on, Rick.
I'll make a note, but I believe that all of the projects that are in bold, both in the cities and the counties, are intended to be in the collaborative, the regional collaborative list.
Right.
That's in advance of the individual list.
Right. That was my understanding as well. Okay. Manitou Springs, Becky still on? I'm sorry, not Becky. Who's going to do Manitou? All right, any questions for Manitou's list? I don't think it's changed since last month when we looked at it. All right, not seeing anyone. City of Cowhan's list has not changed. And Rama's Green Mountain Falls. Green Mountain Falls list. For RTA 3, I'm sorry, I'm confusing myself. Any questions on Green Mountain Falls list? Same question for Rama. Any questions on Rama's project? Okay. Any questions that anybody's second chance around? You got questions on the PPRTA 3 capital projects list?
Hey, this is Dave D again. Just to put a ribbon on my earlier question about the roundabout and fire evacuation. Gail, would you be so kind as to kind of walk me through, or are you suggesting we expand the nomenclature, record that in these minutes for future reference? What's your suggestion there? I just don't want to see 1,000 angry fire evacuation people.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. I was laughing only just because I'm getting a lot of inquiries about other things, Dave. I apologize. It has nothing to do about the project. I think right now, because this is the Citizens Advisory Committee, that it goes in the minutes, and then we can get some direction from the board and make sure that, Jim, when we talk about this next week, when we discuss the RTA 3, let's talk about some recommended suggestions from the CAC, and this is obviously one. And we can talk about changing the project title and description to have more flexibility for options in the future. That's one option, or we can start going through the discussion about the operational improvements that a roundabout would provide, as Scott mentioned earlier. But either.
I think it's got a little bit of a title, like what Rick was saying earlier about controlling narrative by getting ahead of the negative comments and the negative perception that a roundabout slows things down when in fact it increases volume.
Mhm.
And so I think that part of this is a concern that I've had on several of the projects is about the narrative and getting ahead of the uninformed, not ignorant, but uninformed on the details, because you guys don't even know all the details
Right.
yet.
Yeah, I'm happy to make the change, but I do want to make sure, because it has gone through our city council already, that if that's the direction from the board, I'm happy to take that back. I don't see that being an issue. The one thing I also want to address Mr. Hoover's comment about the trail projects. One of the things, we have a separate Midland Trail project that's identified Plus, we had the Midland Trail Corridor Improvements Program. Those could be combined just to have that one effort in the program. That project was a specific, the reason why it's on there, that along with all the rest of these named projects were output from different studies, whether it's Connect COS and some of the corridor studies and planning efforts that have taken place. But if we want to change or help manage that perception, I'd be happy to take it back to combine those into one effort.
I just want to check, has our relationship diminished for going from Rick to Mr. Hoover?
No, I will call you, Rick, when we come talk to me afterwards, but I try to do my best to be as professional as possible. But I do appreciate the fact that you guys do allow me to refer to you by your first name, so I appreciate that.
All right. So Rick,
So do you want to have a CAC vote on revised wording that Dave Zelenak is proposing for the roundabout?
Yeah, I guess we could. Well, let me just ask informally, does everybody understand and kind of agree with Dave's comments to Gail on that roundabout?
I do. This is Ann up in the mountains. I think roundabouts slow people down. Thank you.
Carlos?
I'm gonna respectfully disagree with Mr. Zelenak, Dave Zelenak's assessment here. I do believe that the city, I don't want to engineer it here. The engineers, I expect that they will use the wildfire urban interface guidelines and evacuation and speak with our first responders and our fire department when they put in infrastructure. So it's going to change. And so engineering it here is probably not the appropriate thing. If we find that the roundabout is not the appropriate type of infrastructure there, then we change it, at that time. But right now, the best practices is a roundabout. It does increase the flow, and hearing citizens' concerns is something we need to do. But we need to let the engineers do their work. And so I'm going to say if they recommend a roundabout to improve this intersection, then that's what we tell the citizens. But I do expect the engineers to follow the best practices for evacuations.
Yeah, I think Dave's talking about just the semantics in terms of the labeling and Rick, I think maybe instead of taking a vote, let's use this discussion as a recording in the minutes that we've discussed it, and then I'll make the recommendation during the CAC presentation that we discussed this for the board next week. Is that you think that's okay?
Do you have specific wording or what's the from and to? Do you have the wording that you feel comfortable presenting?
No, I kind of. Go ahead,
This
Dave.
is Scott. Can we just change the word roundabout to intersection improvements and move on?
I would agree. That's easy.
Gail, you okay?
I am more than comfortable doing that. I think
Okay.
that's a minor enough change. It's not going to be an
Okay.
issue.
All right, that kind of captures the discussion, I think, without a formal presentation, and let Gail work that back through her channels and make that. So, all right.
Sold. Thank you.
Richard?
Jim, I don't have anything to say about the roundabout, but I like a clarification. I've already expressed how I feel about some changes in the city part of the next phase of the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority. I thought really we might, it looks like, am I going to have, if I want to oppose the city's changes that have been made, does that mean I'm going to have to oppose the entire, this entire plan for PPRTA?
I did not plan on breaking them out by community. It is they're being presented individually, but it is ultimately next month will be into a single list in alphabetical order.
Then what I'm, would ask that you do, I will, that, I had thought they were going to be individual. I cannot vote against the overall total list. So I'll have to change my vote to a yes, but I would appreciate it if you in your presentation to our board that as one member of the CAC, or you can say one member and you can identify me or not, had extremely strong objections to that and would have voted against it if we had done it jurisdiction by jurisdiction. Thank you.
Okay.
Jim?
Yes, Joan?
Hi, just a point of clarification. I know this is all going forward as a group. Would there be a problem with voting up and down on each list rather than the entire package?
That's been done before, I do believe. This is Ann.
I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not trying to burst anyone's bubble. I'm just.
Yeah, I know.
What's going to happen if one of them fails?
One what?
One of the lists. Let's say that we do individuals, and let's say that the majority says that Colorado Springs didn't pass. What is Gail supposed to do? Go back and start over?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was headed, was these have been approved by the city councils and the respective highway and traffic committees. So Rick, hang on, everybody. Rick's got a comment.
As you know, and Jim, I think you have it in the inside cover of your binder there. I've made a list of the 10 most probable Robert's Rules questions that come up. And number 4 is a motion for a division of the question. So that means if there's a motion a second and that passes, then the CAC is requiring that you vote on each of the 6 lists separately. So it's called a motion for division of the question.
Jim, I was asking just for informational purposes. I will not make that motion. I think it's unnecessary.
Okay. I'm gonna stick with a single vote on all lists. As that's where we're going forward. And so I would, unless the majority of the CAC members want to do it, I would not want to split this and divide it into individual communities. We've gone too far down this road to start getting to that level of voting, in my opinion. So
I agree with you, Jim. I think, however, you can present to the board the concerns that folks have about the city's list, but that we vote it all together and not break it apart.
and I'm willing to do that. And I think that those who have been to board meetings know that I try to represent the discussion here as accurately as I can when I do present to the committee.
Mr. Chair,
So
I'd like to.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
My comment also is that you can join the meeting on Zoom. I've done it a couple times. Or you can go to the meeting and express your opinion or your feelings to them directly, because it is part of the agenda. So you would be part of the discussion if you'd like to.
Yes, that's right. I've done that before. I've gone to directors' meetings and spoken up. And everyone always has the right to do that as an individual. Thank you.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I think I've kind of lost my train of thought here on as to where we're going with this. Is it this concern then among the CAC members is that we didn't address adequately east-west mobility? I hear concerns about the list, but now I'm kind of lost on that. Is it east-west mobility and the fact that we took projects off that could have helped with east-west mobility? Is that the largest concerns with
No.
this list? Is it trails? I'm not
Yes.
sure. I'm not sure I understand what, because I'm in the same position. I got to sell this to my neighbors. Why is this important? Well, what about east-west mobility? Well, we discussed it and it fell off the list for various reasons, but I just want to make sure I understand people's concerns here because I'm here to help, with articulating what it is we need to do as an advisory committee here to our elected leaders to make the right decisions. That's why I'm here.
Carlos, my answer is that was entirely my position. But I'm going to vote to support this because I strongly support PPRTA going forth. And I'm not going to make them, I'm not going to object to that. So I have to vote yes.
okay. I get it. I'll cover it when we do the brief. But right now I'd like to someone call for the question and let's make a recommendation or a motion on the combined.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead. Rick was talking. Yep, sorry.
this is Joan. I was just going to make a motion for a positive recommendation to the board of the lists as presented.
Rick, will you second that? Rick Hoover, second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Aye.
not hearing any. Who was talking? Who? Oh,
This is
okay.
Ann. I'd like to abstain.
Okay,
Thank you.
you got that, Rick.
Well, congratulations then. Well done, everyone.
All right. I think Rick brought it up. This has been a long, arduous path that we've been on for the last year. Taking a look at all of the wording and all that stuff, but I'm very pleased with how it's gone and the improvements we've made and the changes, the updates and all that. And what we don't see is the hours and hours of hard work that's gone in by the staff of each of these respective member governments to make this happen. So thank you to all of the staff that support that. All right, moving on. Item 7C. City of Colorado Springs Multimodal and Mitigation Opportunity Fund Grant. So Gail, you going?
Yes, and I'm going to kind of walk through this memo a little carefully because policy 31 is new, one, and two, I mentioned two projects in this memo, and I'd like to discuss three to get your permission on, and I can revise the memo for the board should that be the case. But if you recall, in the last few months, we worked with the CAC and the PPRTA board to develop, which is now board policy 31. And what board policy 31 is really gives member governments the ability to have PPRTA apply on a member government's behalf for state grant funds. Why that is important for us is, if you recall, because the state grant funds, but that Senate Bill 260 that passed last year, there are a lot of additional state grant funds opportunity, particularly in this year. And it was really going to impact the Tabor caps for everybody, with the exception, I think it is at Manitou, that's not Tabor restricted. Anyway, but the city, and then the funds would be received and they could be applied for a project. The city was in the best position to work with the regional community to be able to accept state funds because we can put those funds through our programs as local and put them together with local match that we're going to be providing. With the state, they offered $19.5 million in total grant funding, most of which is MMOF. And every member government in PPACG that requested MMOF funding can receive full funding as requested, but the deal came up with the state funding. So since the city had the ability to take the state funds and exercise policy 31, we said we would take those and go through this process with you all. The three projects that we're proposing are the Sinton Trail Crossing at Centennial Boulevard, the Colorado Springs 3 Trails Crossing, those are on-street bike crossings. And then the third project we want to add is the battery electric buses that Brian mentioned earlier. That first project, that Sinton Trail Crossing at Centennial, the total cost of that is just over $6.1 million, and we'd be asking for the grant funds and just under $3.1 million, where Pprta would service the applicant on our behalf. The three trail crossings are for Homestead at Dublin, the Woodman Trail at Rangewood, and then hopefully there's enough funding for the Skyline Trail at Mirage Drive. That total right now is 1.9 million, half of which would be 850,000 approximately. And then on the battery electric buses, the total award would be over 3.2 million, 1.612 million would come through the fixed route bus system vehicle replacement. So all those have a home that they could go through and be directed towards city projects. That's just really an overview on that and the three projects where we'd like to apply or ask Pprta to be our applicant. The city will be still doing the heavy lifting on that. It would really be Pprta name and be able to provide those funds in our pockets or in our program buckets. If that makes sense. So that's a lot of information. Are there questions I can answer for you all?
Of course, Mr. Chair, I always have comments on our trail stuff. He's looking at me here. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Carlos again. Yeah, the Sinton Trail Improvement Programs. You did notice it's substandard, not user-friendly, kind of single file use. I'm going to have to add, it's also hazardous. I do know of a bike rider who has injured themselves in that tunnel. It's it just has a lot of problems. So when you have hazards and injuries occur with people using those types of facilities, it definitely needs to be worked on. So I'm definitely very much in favor of this, getting that corrected. It was not built right the first time. I'm not sure what happened there, but it needs to be corrected.
We agree. And when we went through Connect COS, this was one of the two. In fact, this was, I can't remember if this is number 1 or 2, but of the request for improvements in our non-motorized system. So it's great to be able to go and address that. I will caution you, one of the reasons I think why it was built the way it was in the first place, because it has some very significant technical challenges in there, which you don't really realize what the utilities are in that area. But we are hoping to be able to do our best. In fact, we're going to assign the project manager that did the Centennial work up there previously, since he has the background on that.
And if Mr. Chair, if I can just make a comment on these 3 trail crossings here as well. I've definitely, this is my neighborhood, these have been asked for a lot of my neighbors for a long time, especially that crossing at Rangewood there at the Woodman Trail. It does have some sightline issues there. You have to cross 5 lanes of high-speed traffic there. This is something that is definitely needed there on the Woodman Trail. And the Homestead Trail, there's nothing there right now. People have to cross over a guardrail, hop over a guardrail or come around. There's nothing there. And of course, the Mirage project, for those who don't know, there's a lot of kids who go there to High Plains Elementary. So this is actually a safe routes to school type of facility that we can get to get our kids walking to school, and using the Skyline Trail to get there. So definitely these are great projects, and I appreciate the city elevating this, and hopefully we'll get these grants. So thank you.
I will mention that we've already gone through a pre-award process. So we are going to get these grants. I'm 99% sure we're going to get these grants. We've gone through a competitive process, and this is the spreadsheet attached to this memo is the pre-award notice.
So to boil this down, all we're really, aside from the projects that you're going with, the process here is making RTA the applicant to help get around, how's that program? The Tabor, to get around the Tabor limits, that state funds count towards Tabor limits, which is kind of dumb, but anyway. So that's what we're really looking at, is not only the projects, but the process of RTA being the applicant. So.
Could I ask a question, Jim? This is
Sure, Ann.
Ann. Or I could ask Rick Sonnenberg. Have other members applied in this way yet? Is everyone can do it for their town, right?
Not yet. This board policy is relatively new, so the city's request this month is they're the first ones.
Well, is there enough money that others can do that too?
Yes, they're actually using their own money, their own PPRTA money out of their own PPRTA capital projects as match for the state grant funds.
This is more of a process question and then a funding question.
Well, I was just curious because I've read about this. I kept up with the legislation, but my next question would be, say Green Mountain Falls, if we have private money to match, can you do that too? Do you know? Because we don't.
I'm sorry, Ann. Please repeat the question. I'm sorry, Ann.
Well, if I think it's a great idea. I remember when this was presented to the trustees in Green Mountain Falls, and I just wondered, we have limited money and we're already borrowing some. If we have people that have money and can get a fund together to make grant a match, would this be available? Does that make sense?
Yes. If it's for a PPRTA project of your jurisdiction.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
And so that would apply right now for Green Mountain Falls, that would only be the Stilling Basins, because that's the only remaining capital project that Green Mountain Falls has in PPRTA 2 for the next 2.5 years.
Okay, so this one for Colorado Springs is for what's already on the list, right? So they're just asking for more money to finish it up.
Yes, they're asking to use the PPRTA as the applicant,
right,
to apply for the state grant money to use on their PPRTA capital projects. And so they're using us to leverage the state grant money for their own PPRTA capital projects.
Well, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure that, that if other people need the money to other jurisdictions within PPRTA, that can be done. So thank you.
Great.
Just one comment related to that, and it's a little inside baseball. As Gail mentioned, the use of this is to not run afoul of the Tabor Act, so that we don't exceed the money we can spend. In the case of Green Mountain Falls, we have been debruced in the phrase. There was an election several years ago where the town exempted themselves from the Tabor limits. So this is not something that Green Mountain Falls would need to avail itself of.
Okay. Good piece of info. Thanks.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a positive
great.
recommendation for, sorry.
Oh, I might go ahead. Go ahead, Carlos.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to make a positive recommendation that the city submit this grant on behalf of the PPRTA for the trail crossings and the electric buses.
Clarify wording, the RTA will submit the application for the city.
On behalf of the city. Well, let me say it with per board policy 31, let me amend it.
Yeah.
Per board policy 31, to submit a grant application for the 3 trail crossings, Sit-in Trail, and 2 battery electric buses. Make a motion for that.
We get that correct, Gail?
Did I do it right for the board
I
policy 31?
think
It's a little
so.
complicated
Yeah.
with
I think so.
Okay, we have, a
per board policy 31 is the key phrase there. So,
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, great, awesome. We're making progress. City of Colorado Springs letter of support for bridge investment program planning grant application, Fillmore Bridges. Gail.
All right, another new one for you all. As you know, I've been aggressively pursuing different grant opportunities, whether it be state and federal, and in the new Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. There's one of the new federal programs out there. It's called the Bridge Investment Program, or BIP. Under that program, they have 3 different categories where you can apply for funding for bridge projects. We want to start, I know I wrote this memo for 2 projects. I'm actually going to remove one of this one. We know we have some issues on the Fillmore bridges. We have Fillmore bridges on the A list proposed for PPRTA 3 authorization. We would like to apply for a planning grant to begin federalizing that project to be able to capture larger federal grants to replace those bridges in the future. So we are intending to apply for a planning grant under the BIP program. This is a new NOFO, new program, new grant application that we've seen before. We may need a letter of support, and more importantly, a letter of funding demonstrating that we have the funding available for this project. As we're working through the details, we would anticipate our grant ask being in the amount ranging between $2.5 and $5 million. And this type of grant has a 20% match. So we would be planning between $500,000 and $1 million in local match. And we intend for those funds to come from the city's emergency bridge fund at this point in time. So we're just asking for confirmation that if needed, a letter of support and a letter of funding obligation could be provided by the PPRTA. I will mention we have removed the plat bridges. Not that we don't need them, we absolutely do need them, but we didn't want to be competing with ourselves and dilute our ask on the Fillmore project.
Did we not apply for a grant on the South Nevada and Tejon bridges as well?
We have, and in fact, we've applied for 2 separate grants. The first one we received notice that we won the grant. And that was for preliminary engineering and the NEPA work for, it's the Nevada and Tejon rail bridges, plus the rail bridge over Shicks Run and the Las Vegas Street Bridge over Shicks Run, plus in 2 quiet zones are really included in that whole package. So that we're successful with that. And then we applied for a second one, which is a combination of 2 that has the mega and the infra grant application. And we asked for, I think it was over $77 million to help with construction on that. And I have a pretty significant funding scheme for the local match on that, should we be successful, when we're successful. Anyway, on that.
All right, any questions for Gail on this one? Okay, hear a motion.
I motion to approve.
All right, Ryan. Second. Rick Hoover, second. All right, thank you very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the city's request, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing one, great. All right. 7E is an informational item. If I understand this correctly, Gail and Josh, one of the board members asked for an update on right-of-way acquisitions related to various projects. And this is complying with that request. Is that a simple solution? I mean, a simple explanation?
Yes.
but it is basically just all the acquisitions that take place around the projects that are being worked on and that have happened in this year.
That's correct. They were concerned knowing that right away is a long lead item and how it can significantly impact the project schedule. They just want to make sure we are on track with the right of way acquisitions to be successful delivering the projects.
So there's nothing to get into unless you have some questions about any of those individually. I'm going to make the same assumption for the county, Josh.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so 7G is Rick's, it's a staff review of the report from all the member governments on their project status. Rick rides around and looks at all those things and verifies that they've done what they say they do and checks them off. And so if you're ever bored one afternoon and you want to ride around with Rick, you get to see parts of the city and see what people have done. Rick?
Just a quick question. I probably should already know this, but what does side yard mean? You have
Usually a
ramp.
corner lot, and it's not the frontage of the address, it's the other side of the corner lot. So it's a side yard.
Okay, so it's just, it doesn't describe what the work is actually is, it's just where it was.
Yes.
Okay.
It's curb and gutter or sidewalk that's on the side of the house, usually on a corner lot.
Yeah, and because you have, ped ramp and stuff like that as a description, and I thought that side yard, what kind of project was that? Okay.
All right. All right. Report of recent board actions, that's an information item. That's in your packet as well.
Mr. Chair, if I could take just a few seconds, want to point out item number 9 in my memo where the board revised the cutoff list between the A list and the B list from the 75% that had been discussed for many months, revised the 75% cutoff to 83% cutoff, and that's how particularly the city and the county were able to move some B list projects into the A list. I think that's it.
Yeah, that was a direct result of us noticing that we were over, that the member governments were over the original planning number. And the board's solution was just to raise that planning number to allow that to happen. So that was a good thing.
Also that Beverly's financials received a clean audit from the independent outside auditor.
Yes, major thing. All right. 8B, City of Fountain's request to join RTA. So Rick, you want to lead this off or just, me just to, all right. So let me introduce Scott Trainer. And Scott, if you would just, without me stealing any of your thunder, explain what you're here. Oh, the red button. Just explain what you're here to do, and the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you. Rick, did you want to start or do you want me to start? Am I good? Why don't I just, I know it's been a long meeting. I'll just try to give an overview and Rick, jump in if I miss anything critical. How about that? First of all, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate the members of the committee for allowing us a few minutes just to stand here. I found out this morning I was going to be leading the charge of the conversation today. The gentleman who was going to be doing it ended up testing positive for COVID. So we all know how that goes. Puts them on hold for a little bit, but happy to be here. You got the B team today. I didn't realize there was going to be so many virtually. So I sent a PDF out to Jessica to try to get it so we could pull it up. Our PDF, the PDF that we sent wasn't working. So I do have some handouts here. And I'll just kind of give a little bit of background and I'll jump through. I want to just briefly mention that sometime late last year, our Mayor Thompson was having conversations with Councilmember Wayne Williams, who discussed PPRTA and maybe exploring, explaining first of all what was going to be going on with PPRTA 3, and suggesting that we ought to get a little bit more information and discuss whether we ought to think about joining. And so she brought that back, and we decided, yeah, we really do. We need to reach out. So we reached out to Rick Sonnenberg and Andy Gunning, and we spent a little bit of time with them. They were gracious enough to come down and meet with us and walk through PPRTA, give us a little bit more, give me and my staff more information about that, a little bit of background, how that works, how it functions, et cetera. And so based on that, we've had some really good conversation with our mayor and council and started talking about, hey, why don't we consider bringing that to our citizenry this next year. That was at the end of last year. So at the end of this year, when our elections are. So those have been great conversations. At the beginning of this year in January, our city council actually formally put this on their strategic plan as something that they thought was really going to be an important thing for us. And so based on that, we began to move forward. They had 2 items that they viewed from a ballot measure standpoint as something really important to our community. One of them was PPRTA and the other one's a public safety ballot measure. So fast forward in time, we came together, the staff did with our council, and discussed hiring a company to come and do a survey because we wanted to get a sense from our citizenry how they thought something like that might fly. And so we did that. We hired, many of you may have been involved with various surveys with Magellan Strategies. We hired Magellan. I think they've done quite a bit of work for the city of Colorado Springs. They've got a great reputation. So we hired Dave Flaherty with Magellan, and they just recently conducted a survey for both our public safety interests as well as the PPRTA interests. Oh, and by the way, I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Scott Trader. I'm the city manager of Fountain. Been down there for about 15 years. And I haven't ever had a chance to attend this. So I appreciated the chair offering before the meeting, maybe moving me up the agenda, but it was really interesting for me to be able to sit and kind of hear how the conversations went and the discussion and so forth. So that was really helpful for me. So thank you. So what you have before you, and I apologize for those online. I will make sure that we get a better PDF that we send out to Jessica so she can send this out. But what we have right here for those in this room is some information that came out of our survey. So I thought this would be of interest to the CAC, and so I can share this with you. And by the way, I'm not going to go through every page of this, but there's a few pages I wanted to highlight. The very first one is page 1, when they asked, how would you rate the condition of the streets and roads in the city of Fountain? And one of the things that we really have going for us as a community with regard to this issue is that, of course, every community really feels importantly about roads, and they're high priority items. But it was really interesting that Mr. Flaherty with Magellan indicated he's never done a survey that rated the road condition so poorly. So I guess, yay for us. That gives us something that we can really kind of strive for. And that might be the kind of thing that our citizenry really, because they feel so strongly about our poor roads, will hopefully support our efforts in this. So I wanted to highlight that to you. This survey was of about 520 people in our community. There's a error rate of plus or minus 4.23%. That's right on the bottom of page 1. If you would jump over to page 3, thought this was a really interesting one. Do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of the Pikes Peak rural transport? Is it regional or rural?
Rural.
Okay, all right. Transportation Authority, we had 37% had never heard of the RTA, which doesn't really surprise me for Fountain because we're not members, and a lot of our folks are really transient. They come in and they're out a lot because of Fort Carson. So that didn't surprise me a lot. But those who did, we had 17% favorable, 17% unfavorable, and we had quite a few who had heard of but really didn't have an opinion. I think there's, for us, we also look at this as a real positive as well, because as you are out looking at PPRTA 3, I think there's probably going to be a lot of information that gets out there in the broader region. It's really valuable for our citizenry who maybe haven't been keyed in on PPRTA in the past to now hear those messages, right? And to hear about those messages and hear how it might benefit the greater region. And we're hoping that that word of mouth gets out and really helps sell that on. Oh, thank you. We have it up now. Thank you, Jessica. All right. So I wanted to jump over to page 5. This was an interesting question for us because when you do these surveys, we have an uninformed portion of the survey where we try to get the information out, but not a whole lot of information, just to get a sense at the beginning. Is this something that the citizenry might support. So this first question is, if an election were being held today, would you vote yes and approve or vote no and reject a 1% sales and use tax to join the PPRTA? And of course, this is the uninformed. So we really haven't provided them any information at this point. But you can see on that, even at that point with no information, we had 58% of people said we would vote, yeah, we would vote to approve it. It's important to us. And so I'll get to a slide later, but the informed, as we provided more information throughout the survey, the informed vote ends up being 71%. So you can really see, I mean, in my book, that's a very strong level of support, particularly with the limited amount of information you really can get out in a survey like this. But even with that, you know, you can tell that folks are very supportive, which was very encouraging to us. We believe that if this is the direction our city council decides to go, as we get out there and we share more information in a more personalized setting, you know, in city and town hall meetings, those sorts of things, we think we can get even more support for that. There are a number of questions throughout here that may be of interest for you to review, just to get a sense of how people feel about some of the different aspects of PPR. And by the way, the different demographics and, you know, who would vote yes, age-wise, income-wise, et cetera. But if you would jump over to, I'm going to jump a few slides in here to slide number 13. So this is now after we've asked and provided, we've asked a lot of different questions at this point in the survey. And through asking those questions provided, I like how some of those are upside down. Anyway, as we provided information, you see this is the slide that then shows a 71% support of approving the RTA, us joining the RTA. So we looked at that and went, wow, that's, you know, that's very, that's interesting. That's a lot of support in our community. If you jump back to even further back, there's some slides that show some comments around why people would vote yes, why they would vote no. Very similar answers that you'd see in just about any community. And on slide 17, uninformed versus informed PPRTA taxes, you can see there, again, that's just another highlight of how the uninformed voter feels versus the informed. And then finally, as you jump back, well, not finally, but if you jump back to 19, if an election were being held today, would you vote yes and approve a ballot measure for a 1% sales and use tax to join the PPRTA transportation authority, or would you vote no and reject it? That's a question that came after providing them at the very end of the survey information that, hey, we are exploring both a public safety ballot measure as well as this road ballot measure. And so you can see on that, there is very little support from our community, as you can imagine, most communities for both, right? With the economy the way it is and just all the unknowns out in the world today, our citizenry, by the way, polled very highly on the public safety one as well. So we have two ballot measures that poll very highly, but together it's like, no, I'll give you one or the other, but I definitely can't afford to give you both, which, you know, isn't surprising, but that was a question that we felt we needed to ask because we needed to get a sense of, all right, so where do we go with this? And then so finally, I will go back to 21. There's some final thoughts and conclusions. That's from Magellan as they put this together. You can see that Fountain voters overwhelmingly want their local streets and roads to be repaired. They're desperate for a solution. There is no need to convince them why additional funds are needed. I suspect that's really true in a lot of communities. Roads are a big topic in all of our local governments. Second one there is support levels for the ballot measure at 50% before, 71% afterwards. They meaning Magellan felt very strongly that that was just extremely positive. So, you know, that's the information our council just recently looked at their last council meeting with Magellan. And they went through that as well as the public safety information. They are now going to meet at their next council meeting to discuss, all right, where do we go with this? Which one do we do? What's important to us? We think that there's a lot of advantages. Well, there's obviously advantages to both and there's needs for both, but we really think there's, from a timing standpoint, there's a lot of advantages with the RTA, partially because you're going through a lot of that information campaign, or will be going through a lot of that information campaign this year. But also because we pay RTA taxes, or our voters pay RTA taxes within city commercial developments now. And so this is a way that we can go to them and say, hey, look, we have a big portion of our commercial area that you already pay these at, and we don't have the benefit that comes from that. So this is a really unique opportunity to get those sales taxes that you pay already, you're already paying them, and have them come back to use for roads. And I think that's a message that it's a complex message to explain in a survey, but it's actually not a complex message when you're able to sit down and talk with folks across the table and say, hey, here's some of the reasons why we think this is important. We think this is valuable. But I just wanted to come. We wanted to make sure that we took a few minutes, came and talked to the CAC, got any feedback that we needed to hear from you. We know we're going to need to be going entity to entity to each member to talk with each member government to see if everyone supports us joining. And then we'll also be talking to the board, I think at your meeting next Wednesday, about this as well. So our council will be meeting Tuesday night of the next week and making some decisions. And then hopefully we'll be at the board the next day and talking about it with them. But so that's everything I had. Rick, is there anything that you needed anything else I need to be hitting on that you can think of? Okay. Are there any questions that anyone has for me?
Mr.
Go ahead,
Mr.
Carlos.
Chair. Yeah, thank you very much for coming here before the committee here. Tell us about moving fountain forward tax. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So moving fountain forward is a 1% sales tax. So we for virtually the same reasons. I call when they first adopted, I called it our mini RTA, right? Our local RTA. That's a 1% tax. It had a portion for transit, a portion for road maintenance, and a portion for capital. Our capital portion ran out a couple of years ago. We took it back to the voters. The voters said, thanks, but no thanks. We're good for now. So the capital piece went away. We completed most of those capital projects. We're still completing a couple of, well, for some of the reasons we talked about, or I heard talked about today, as far as the costs increasing. So we have a couple that we're still adding some of our own dollars to complete, but the capital portion is gone. Now we still have a little bit for transit and a little bit for road maintenance.
So there'd be two taxes.
Oh, Dave, you got a question?
Well, I do. Scott, hi, nice to see you. And
Dave.
Congratulations on still doing a fabulous job there for the city of Fountain. I'm sure they're still delighted to have you. Hey, just had a quick question. Some communities, the smaller ones tend to be recipient communities. Some tend to be donor communities. Roughly, are you guys on the donor end? Are you on the recipient end? I'm sure it's got to be worth your while, but give a sense for where on that scale Fountain would lie.
I think we'd be on the recipient side. And that's based on some information we received from Rick and Andy when we began. Now, I say that partially, and I don't know that net would be, but because those dollars that are coming out of South Academy Highlands right now, we don't receive. So we would be receiving those.
Oh, that's right. Refresh your memory on that. That was the result, I know, of a lot of spirited discussion, to say the least, isn't that? Did you refresh your memories about that? What happened and where you're at there?
Yeah. So, boy, that goes back a bunch of years now. So when South Academy Highlands was annexed, so here's what we found. I'll give you the sort of the Reader's Digest end result. At the end of the day, it was determined that if a parcel of land was already in RTA and it annexes into a non-member government, it would still be subject to RTA taxes whenever it, in the future developed. And so that portion of land had been in RTA since the inception of RTA, of course, and then annexed into the city of Fountain. And ultimately, because of that, even though Fountain wasn't a member, they would be required to pay the RTA tax into the RTA. And so South Academy Highlands is the biggest example of that. However, we have a number of small parcels and even home-based businesses that are in residential neighborhoods that annexed in after RTA that are still subject to that tax.
And the property he's talking about is where Walmart, Sam's Club, Sam's Club are down off of
right across from Pikes Peak Community College.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So so that, I mean, as much as that was a challenge for us, of course, when it happened, that in today's conversation with our citizenry ends up being a plus because we can tell our citizenry, hey, you're paying it if you go to these areas. In fact, there are certain small, in the middle of regular shopping centers, little lots that had been enclaves before, but when they annexed in, and they still, even though they're surrounded by non-RTA properties, they are RTA because they annex in afterwards. And going back to Mr. Perez's question, yes, in those areas we would have two taxes.
Well, Scott, thank you. I wholeheartedly support you folks moving forward, and we'll do all I can to give you a thumbs up, a green light, and a positive vote. So good on you. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
This is Scott. What is your guys' timing? Is your intention to be on this November's ballot and have capital projects?
So, and Rick, you jump in and correct me if I misstate this, but here's what my understanding is. It's really too late for the capital side. So what we would be doing, there'd really be two votes. There would be us going to our citizenry this year. I'm presuming. Well, let's just presume that the board and the members say, yes, it's okay if you join, then we would go to our own voters to join. Is that right, Rick? To first say, can we join? And then-
Yes.
okay.
Are you, if you do go this November 8, to your voters, are you going to do coordinated through clerk and recorder?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we would.
So that'd be the first step.
Yep. And then we would come back probably next year with a separate vote that we would have to then do throughout the county to add projects to the capital list. And then we'd be on the hook for handling that.
So, so that would be November of 23 potentially, and that would be a PPRTA ballot asking the voters to add the Fountain capital list, similar to what we did in 2017 when we asked the voters if the voters wanted to add the CDOT's I-25 gap project as one of our projects, and the voters approved that in 2017. So it'd be a PPRTA ballot in November of 23 after Fountain, potentially if they decide next Tuesday night to move forward, then it'd be a two-step process. The Fountain has a joining ballot in November of 22, and then PPRTA, if so requested from the Fountain, would then have a PPRTA wide. All the PPRTA voters would be asked if they want to add Fountain's projects.
Yeah, I think if we would have really been on the stick and had these conversations earlier, then it sounds like we would have probably been able to do something similar to Calhan, where it was at one time, right? Does that sound right, Rick? Or was there any opportunity to really do it at one time?
Both Calhan and Rama had their joining ballots. Let's see, Calhan had their joining ballot last November 21.
Oh, yeah.
So they joined effective January 1st of 22. Then they can, this summer, asked to add their capital list to us for our November 8 ballot.
Gotcha.
So it again, that's a two-year, two separate ballot process.
Gotcha. Okay. And then there was a question about whether this is a rejoining, and we've never been a part of RTA. We used to contract with Mountain Metro to provide transit in Fountain. We contracted with them for a number of years, but we've never been a member of RTA. Yeah.
Rick.
One other process, piece of information. The several documents, I guess it's the establishing IJ, requires that each and every one of the 6 member governments, by a majority vote of each, have to give the thumbs up for a new member. That has to happen at some point. It doesn't have to happen right now, but it's in Fountain or any new prospective member government's interest to know that, to know if any of the 6 are going to give a thumbs down, to know that before they go to the ballot. So the ballot timing for them and for anybody on the coordinated clerk and recorder ballot for this November is in July, sending in a letter saying, yes, we intend to have a ballot measure. And that's what the PPRTA boards can be voting on next Wednesday, is to reply to the clerk and recorder letter that I received. The final act is has to be an intergovernmental agreement between a member government and what I'm recalling is having to pay half of the estimated clerk and recorder fee. That has to be by August 30. So if the Fountain City Council gives this the thumbs up to make the request at their meeting on next Tuesday night and come into the board on Wednesday and say, yes, we want to proceed, then what our board would do next Wednesday afternoon would be refer out to the 6 member governments saying Fountain wants to join. We need to know from you as a courtesy to Fountain before they sign the IGA with the clerk recorder and pay half the fee for the November 8 ballot. Please let us know optimally by August 10, or Fountain's going to have to contact, like Scott said, going to have to contact any of the 6 member governments that we haven't heard from by August 10 by the next PPRTA board meeting. So then the risk and the burdens on Fountain to contact any of the 6 that haven't responded to the board by August 10 to find out if there's any thumbs downs, so Fountain can maybe bail out and not have to go to the ballot if any of the 6 member governments give the thumbs down and kill this.
Thank you.
So go ahead, Carlos. I'll hold mine till you finish.
Well, and just one more clarification. This is, again, Carlos on the CAC here. Just the question about, has there been any thought or discussion about integrating the transit systems that's in the city of Fountain, and maybe it's premature. Maybe there is no way to do that. We have our Mountain Metro Transit, but there are commuters, there are people who come to Colorado Springs to go to Fountain, and of course with Fort Carson and everything. It's really there is a regional transportation need for mass transit. Has any thought been given to that as part of this discussion that you're having, or is it premature at this time?
Well, I don't want to say no thought's been given to it, but right now, and Mountain Metro used to provide our service. They did a great job providing the service. What happens though, because we have so fewer riders in Mountain Metro, they have a need to provide bigger vehicles, CDL drivers, et cetera. For Fountain, because of the reduced number of riders we have, we actually operate with very small buses, and actually are looking at going to sort of, I don't know what they call them, but almost upsized transit type vans. And so it's a real different kind of system. Not that it couldn't be done, but they operate very differently. And so, so we just hadn't really thought about that. We've got the dollars that come in through transit right now that help us with the transit side. And I suspect if we had conversations, I mean, anything could be worked out, but I suspect there also may be some different goals or desires in each of those. I don't know, but we haven't had those conversations.
Yeah, I would just like to see Fountain benefit from the taxes you would be paying into transit. The 1%, portion of that goes to Mountain Metro, and I'd like to see I always feel that if you're going to pay a tax, you should get a benefit from it. And this is one benefit, perhaps, but again, I don't have the details understanding, and just thought that, is this something that's even on the radar, and maybe it's a conversation, but it sounds like you're moving forward here, and just want to ask that question.
We're trying, but I think it's a good question. Both systems actually connect up at Pikes Peak Community College. And so that's been good. In fact, we actually have a route right now that goes up to Garden of the Gods for folks at certain times of the week for folks who really need to get up there. Mountain Metro has been a really good partner in supporting us with that as well. But
Thank you, Carlos, for asking the question. That's the question we've had on mind. And here we would just like to say, we would love to work with City of Fountain on whatever the service type, different. I think it's currently a delayed fixed route that will operate down there. So we're very open to have that conversation down the road with you, and hopefully transit will be part of the consideration. Thank you.
Rick, and then to me.
To try to answer Carlos's question, the current establishing IGA between the member governments, and I'll read a couple of sentences, but I want to first cover how this can be amended. It has to be by a 2/3 vote of the entire governing body of each and every of the member governments, 2/3 minimum of the entire, and it's got to be unanimous of all 6. But here's what the current wording is on transit. Transit funds shall only be used to implement Colorado Springs sponsored transit activities. The authority shall not expend transit funds for any other purpose. any party joining this agreement after January 1st of 2005 is ineligible for transit funding. However, those parties may receive transit service provided by Colorado Springs. May.
So to follow up, it'd be similar to Manitou Springs receiving transit services through like Route 3, for example, be a similar kind of concept to where we can extend Mountain Metro to municipalities outside the boundaries of Colorado Springs. So it'd be a similar kind of thing. But yeah, no, I know there's a lot of planning, a lot of details have to go into it. Sounds like you're open for that. I just wanted to just question really and understanding, but it sounds like there may be some fine tuning on our IGA or an understanding here with the voters as to what they're voting for, because that will come up. Hey, I'm paying a portion of the tax on transit. Where's the benefit for that? And I think that's a question. If I was voting on this, I would ask that question.
Scott, good. Thanks for the information and the time. My personal concerns is that the biggest one is timing. Especially for this year, we're into the final 45 days of here, and there's still, as Rick pointed out, before you go spend all that money, you'd like to have some kind of idea how everybody else feels about you coming into the party. But I'm just concerned about the amount of effort you've got to do and the last minute changes that would be required in what we've been working on for a year. And any potential oversight or overlooking of some minor detail that would put our ballot measure in jeopardy at this timing. Not against you guys joining at all. But the member governments, the board, the other staffs we're at the point of ready to send the ballot language for approval to print. And so that's my biggest concern. And then you guys have got to get voter approval and got to decide which one of those two measures they want first, the public safety or the road stuff. So I'm glad to see that from my personal impression, the attitude has changed a little bit about joining the RTA, because it wasn't always that way for a while.
Right.
Especially after the annexation and that issue. So I'm glad to see that you're moving forward, and our community up here is growing in that direction. And so that gap is going to become more narrow as the county begins to fill in between the two cities and the growth that's going on down there on South Powers and all down that way.
Yeah.
So that's just my concerns. But anybody else got any comments or concerns or questions? I think there's more to be learned and a lot of work to be done before, as we go forward here.
A lot of work for sure. And timing is everything. It's going to be a challenge for sure.
It is.
Absolutely.
So, but on behalf of the CAC, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I hope it wasn't a wasted afternoon for you in
Never.
terms of, thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you all again for give me a few minutes to be here.
Great. Thank you. You bet. All right. Do we have any agenda topics for next meeting? Anybody burning desires to have something discussed? Okay. Any communications, any thing anybody in the member want to communicate? Gail?
I just wanted to let you all know, in case you start seeing it, and we'll have some public service announcements out there, but we're going to have some additional lane closures on the Circle Drive bridges imminently. We have a major structural issue on those bridges, as you can imagine. So we're actually having to do some emergency repairs just to keep them operational right now. So more details to come on that. We have a lot of really smart people scrambling to work on that issue right now. Good news is we have 6 pre-qualified construction contractors to replace those bridges. They all participated in a pre-construction meeting today, and the reports were that it's the most questions they've ever had asked at a construction meeting or pre-construction meeting like that. I will let you know those bids are due August 2nd. The contractors have asked to be given as much time as possible, and we feel like it's important to do so they can sharpen their pencils to bring some good competitive bids. So you will see a memo in your packet. I will be walking on the actual bid results though the day of our next CAC meeting for your recommendation for approval. That's it.
A lot of work on those bridges. Important link. All right. If there anybody online got any last minute comments, questions? Okay, hit end meeting. We'll call this meeting over. Thanks, everybody.